It's really sunshiny where I am. I hope you're enjoying some sunshine too. I'm Mary Beth Gassman, and I am a professor at Rutgers University, and I also have the honor of being the executive director of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Institute for Leadership, Equity, and Justice. And we are sponsoring this important event today. And I am just here to introduce two people, and then they are going to do some introductions and take it away. So I'm really thrilled to be able to introduce to Leah Hollis, who is one of our visiting scholars at Rutgers University, and you will learn a lot more about her in a few minutes, giving this talk today about her new book on bullying in higher education. And to properly introduce Leah is another one of our wonderful visiting scholars with Rutgers and the Proctor Institute, and that's Tanisha Williams. And Tanisha, take it away. And we're really looking forward to learning more about the book and also the conversation between the two of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary Beth. I know that I am super excited to be here. So let's just jump right in. From the moment that I have met Leah, she has been incredibly gracious with sharing of her knowledge and expertise. For me personally, she has served as a mentor, a confidant, and an exemplar of the type of scholar I endeavor to become. It is an honor to hold space with Dr. Leah P. Hollis, and we are all incredibly proud of her and her scholarship. Serving as a lead consultant of equity, access, and diversity, Hollis speaks nationally and internationally, including appearances in Milan, Italy, Oxford, England, New York, Los Angeles, California, Texas, and Pennsylvania. Hollis was featured in Mainline Today as one of 21 Power Women. Dr. Leah P. Hollis is the founder and president of Patricia Berkeley, LLC, a healthy workplace advocate and diversity trainer. Her recent book, Human Resource Perspectives on Workplace Bullying in Higher Education, Understanding Vulnerable Employees' Experiences, is available on Amazon.com. This book examines the structural and organizational problems which enable workplace bullying. Further, the study makes a case for how women, people of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community are most vulnerable. Dr. Hollis is a noted trainer, educator, and researcher who has helped over 250 schools deal with bullying on campus. Her other books include Bullying in the Ivory Tower from 2012 and The Coercive Community College from 2016, which was published by Emerald Publications. She has an exemplary career in higher education administration, where she has held senior leadership and faculty posts. Dr. Hollis has taught at Northeastern University and the New Jersey Institute of Technology and Rutgers University. Dr. Hollis received her Bachelor of Arts degree from Rutgers University and her Master of Arts degree from the University of Pittsburgh. She received her Doctorate of Education in Administration, Training, and Policy Studies from Boston University as a Martin Luther King Jr. Fellow. Currently, she is an associate professor at Morgan State University and a visiting scholar at Rutgers University. That's where I met her. She also serves as an expert witness regarding workplace bullying, harassment, and discrimination. She is also the author of Unequal Opportunity Fired Without Cause, filing with the EEOC, which focuses on workplace discrimination. Also, check out Bullying Beyond the Tower, a peer-reviewed anthology on workplace bullying. Dr. Hollis, you are phenomenal and you are amazing. And I'm so excited to be here with you today. So without any further ado, please allow me to open space for Dr. Leah P. Hollis, who will provide an overview of her most current work.
Wow. Thank you so much to the entire Institute, the tech team, of course, to Mary Beth Gassman. I'll get into those a little bit further. I am truly honored to be here. I'd also like to take a moment to honor the land upon which I am sitting, which has belonged to Indigenous folks. And so I do want to honor the spaces that we sit on. The book that came out May 13th is Bullying, Human Resource Perspectives on Workplace Bullying in Higher Education. And that's the cover of the book. And if you haven't figured out, purple is one of my favorite colors. Next slide. And so the quick presentation before we get into the discussion with Tanisha is to go over the structure of the book. I'm very honored that David Yamada wrote the foreword. I'm going to do an overview of where the data came from, and just give you a quick review of Unit 1 and Unit 2. Next slide, please. And then, as I'd mentioned, we will follow with a brief interview, and we will field questions from participants. At the end of this presentation of the whole book launch, everybody who has chimed in or has participated here, that is by logging on, will get a discount code at the conclusion of the event. Next slide, please. First, a word of thanks. And a little bit about me. When I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, my parents always said you have to thank people before you open your gifts. And I find this book launch truly to be a gift to me from the Rutgers Institute and everybody who has worked together to bring this event. So next slide, please. Of course, I have to give a very special thank you to Mary Beth Gassman, not just for hosting this event. She is an awesome mentor to all of us. And so often we talk about diversity, but then we also need strong allyship, somebody who is there to just bring you along and just love you up and also push you out there, push you out of the nest when you need to do something different. Thank you very much, Mary Beth, for being an awesome ally to underrepresented scholars. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. And of course, the magic behind the scenes, Brandy Jones, Priscilla Pierre, and Michelle Coyne, I believe. All the scholars, professors, respondents, publishers, anybody who has supported this academic research. And of course, a thank you to Dr. Vivian Johnson. Thank you so much. Hoping I'm making you proud. Next slide, please. So let's getting down to brass tacks. What's actually in the book? I'm honored that David Yamada wrote the foreword. He has been writing about workplace bullying over 20 years. And what he talks about in the book is it's very well researched, and also how he started looking at workplace bullying. He is currently a professor of law and director of New Workplace Institute at Suffolk University Law School. Next slide, please. To quote him, and this is of course not the entire foreword, but some of his passages, that the book is a deep dive into bullying in academia, grounded in research and analysis. Oop, previous slide, please.
Sorry about that.
Grounded in research and analysis and viewed through a human resources lens. It is a welcomed examination. Next slide. David Yamada continued, this is a deeply researched volume, incorporating several of my studies and studies of several others. So the advice and the findings are all original research, empirically collected and analyzed. Next slide. And I found this phrase interesting. David Yamada also said, it is thankfully free of the sales jargon and magical thinking that sometimes characterize treatments suggestive of responses and solutions to bullying and related behaviors at work. If I were to rephrase that, instead of me saying, just go wave your magic wand or wish that it goes away, there are some very true empirical findings in here that can help out human resources, help out those who are targeted by bullying, and helping people to understand how the structure of higher education can either help or hinder workplace bullies on campus. Next slide, please. The book structure has 2 units and relies on 3 data sets. The first data set was collected in 2019, which is a human resources data collection. And I wanted to hear directly from human resources. The second data set is also collected in 2019. That's the N is 363. And this was from faculty members, primarily junior faculty members. And the third data set that this book relies upon is from administrators and faculty data collected in the winter of 2018. So the better part of this book is supported by original data that I collected over the course of, say, 18 months. Next slide, please. So the first unit, I look at human resources, training, and bullying. I really like this second chapter, which is human resources, and it's a content analysis where I took the open-ended comments from human resources to get their voices about how bullying affects them, why they may or may not be effective. Another chapter deals with human resources and the organizational structure. On several occasions, HR professionals ask me, well, does the organizational structure have an impact on our effectiveness? And the quick and dirty answer here is no. It's not about where you sit in the organization. It is about who you are reporting to and their commitment to solving these problems. Fourth chapter in Unit 1 deals with HR, bullying, and legal complaints. Workplace bullying is technically legal. And so sometimes people think, oh, bullying is legal, but discrimination is illegal. The truth of the matter is bullying can very quickly wander into part of a legal complaint, and there is a direct relationship between what we consider legal bullying and then how those things blossom into legal complaints. And then the last chapter of Unit 1 deals with Ombudsman and bullying in colleges and universities. Next slide, please. So the structural aggression, there's an organizational scaffolding that enables workplace bullying. So sure, you have a bully, a person, even maybe a group of people, but the structure has to support it. So what typically happens is, and it was interesting in working with David Yamada, he was a bit skeptical, and understandably so, because the literature to this point kind of blames HR. Everybody complains to HR. Everybody thinks HR can be the sword and the shield to protect them from the bully. But keep in mind that HR has a boss too. And if their boss, perhaps a director, a vice president, an AVP, an executive director, it doesn't matter where you're at in the organizational structure. If the person who oversees human resources doesn't approve of a work function, in this case, dealing with workplace bullying, it doesn't happen. HR hasn't been charged to do it. So that is what the first unit is about. Next slide, please. The second unit deals with vulnerable populations. And the studies I've done over the last 10 years really look at how women, people of color, junior faculty are included here, the LGBTQ community. These populations tend to have the least amount of power in an organization. And so if you're at the entry level or middle level position, if you're in positions that don't have those lofty titles, and there are all kinds of structural reasons for that, those people tend to be targets of bullying more often because they don't have the organizational power to resist that abuse. Next slide, please. So who is most hurt? The bullying that is based on the power differential. And those powers can be something like you report upline to a director, and then the director reports to a vice president. And in that organizational power structure, when that power is abused, it can be a problem. We also have different kinds of power, such as expert power, perhaps the faculty member who keeps bringing in these big fat grants, which is great. But then because he or she does that, or they do that, these folks may turn around and use that power to abuse junior faculty. So there are different examples of power, but underrepresented groups tend to have the diminished power and therefore tend to be more likely to face workplace bullying. Next slide, please. And the back matter of the book. So often I get a number of questions when I do lectures and workshops. So I took those questions and typed out the answers. So that is in the back of the book. And also, for the first time, actually, I am publishing the instrument that I use to collect the HR data. People are free to use it, and there is a citation with that instrument if you choose to replicate the study or move on and collect your own data. Next slide. So this is the book again. And now we're on to the really fun part where we're going to talk with Tanisha about workplace bullying in higher education.
So this is super exciting. And I want to thank you for giving us an overview of the book, the context of the book, but I would love for us to dig a little deeper with a few questions that I came up with. So your study started in 2018. They went from 2018 to 2019. You've spoken to HR, you've spoken to faculty members, you've spoken to administrators. Start by contextualizing for us what it is that you've learned about the nature of bullying behaviors. What are those characteristics? Can you see it coming? Tell us more about bullying in general.
That's a great question. What I am coming to terms with, it's not just a bad actor. The organization also has to support it. So let me consider when I used to work in athletics. When I worked in athletics, the coach may or may not engage in academic integrity issues, get papers written for whatever sports team. That kind of bad behavior or corrupt behavior happens because it's allowed to happen. So you not only have a bad actor, the bully, you also have an organization that turns a blind eye to the bully. So both need to occur for this bullying to take place and proliferate across the campus.
Yeah, so we have that understanding, but tell us actually more so a little about the folks who were targeted, I guess. You described them by a particular way, and you focused in on persons of color, women, members of the LGBTQIA plus community. So just drill down for us what you've learned about the impact on those folks.
Well, unfortunately, stress is a killer. Stressful things happen. I don't know if you all remember several years ago, there was a wonderful commentator who worked on Meet the Press. And then when he went on vacation with his son, he died of a heart attack because he finally relaxed and all the stress got to him. Stress and workplace bullying can result in, insomnia, PTSD. It can result in anxiety, panic attacks, stress, hair loss. Right now, I'm working on another data set, and I have just gone through the open-ended comments. And some of the women are commenting, because they've been bullied for an extended period of time, that one reported a premature birth, another reported a grand mal seizure, another reported extreme hair loss, and also it can affect your personal relationships. So imagine that you're stressed out all the time. Well, you really shouldn't come home and kick your dog. I mean, that's called, I think it's called displacement when you do that. But if you do that also with your family, with your kids or with your partner, and you bring that stress home and you don't share with them what's going on, they may feel put off too. So extended periods of facing workplace bullying are bad for health reasons, and also can put a real strain on relationships.
Okay, you've told us so much in just the first two questions. You described a place where there's a bad actor. You've described organizations rife with stress, folks who perhaps are displacing some of their stress, and they have compromised in home lives, they have compromised health. You've talked about folks having a hard time. So I guess my question, or where my brain goes, is how do people not notice, right? If everyone's sad, if everyone's stressed, if everybody's kirking out, for lack of a better way of saying it, how is it that organizations, how do these conditions sustain through all of this, right? Shouldn't someone say, what is going on? We're all unhappy. How do we fix it?
Well, I'm going to liken the trajectory to pass legislation prohibiting workplace bullying to what we went through in the late 80s and early 90s with sexual harassment. So just to give you a little history about that. So when the 1964 civil rights legislation came through, first of all, women were tacked on at the end of it, hoping that it wouldn't pass. Surprise, women are now protected. and you were protected against gender-based harassment. However, from 1964 well into the middle 80s, women who reported being the target of sexual harassment were denied the opportunity to complain because they said, well, it's not our fault that your boss has a personal preference for you. And it took 25 more years to officially get sexual harassment viewed as gender-based harassment. It took some time. The same kind of thing is happening with workplace bullying. So when you have lawyers like David Yamada and other folks who are complaining about it and can transform a workplace bullying situation into a civil rights claim, and several people managed to do that, well, the laws need to catch up. So there are a few states that have laws, but they're not actionable by themselves. And the reason why it's taking so long to get it changed, A, similar to the trajectory of what we saw with sexual harassment, but B, even when we were kids, bullying was sometimes seen as a rite of passage. You played around the playground, you pushed people off the swing set, you jumped on the tires. I mean, the things we used to do as kids, they're like, oh yeah, that's just kids being kids. And sometimes when you complain about workplace bullying, the person receiving the complaint, HR, may take it as, oh, that's just a personality conflict. And also, remember, HR is not charged with handling it in most schools. So that's why it continues.
So you've alluded a bit to litigation, but how, if it continues, how is it that organizations suffer?
We in higher education, wow. I mean, it's not like the 80s when I went to school where there was lots of milk and honey, so to speak, and the state was subsidizing so much of education. I mean, when I went to Rutgers as an undergrad, it was particularly inexpensive and still a wonderful education. Now, with all of these competing interests and less money coming into our schools, they have other things that they're worrying about. Another reason I believe workplace bullying is taking hold is because of those financial reasons. So if you think about any community, if there's lots of resources and lots of money and lots of opportunity, crime rates are down. But the minute resources dry up, all of a sudden people have to compete for limited access. People get a little more aggressive. And so arguably the same thing is happening in higher education. Over the last 15 to 20 years, we have lost quite a bit of our state subsidies across the board, regardless of schools, and fewer are coming to school. I mean, the baby boomer generation and their kids have moved through the system, and people are starting to question the return on investment to school, which means resources are not as plentiful as they were before. All of those things, I believe, contribute to workplace bullying in higher education.
Sorry, tell me it always comes down to the money.
Isn't that a shame? It's been always
where the money resides. Okay, so tell us where the literature needs to go. What do we need to do here? How can we start to dig in and crack and change, and what can researchers do?
I believe we need to start looking at developing and testing interventions. NIH is starting to do that. I've seen some studies, I believe it was out of University of Wisconsin, and they did it with diversity. But we know what the problem is. We know it's a power differential. We know who's most hurt. We know it's health harming. We know this. The literature has really taken hold and examining those things. And I think we need to shift and start looking at tried and true interventions that are sustainable. And also really consider how it hurts the health of your faculty and staff. Especially since we've just come through COVID, all of these colleges and universities are talking about wellness programs, and we need to take care of each other, and we need to hang tight and all of that other stuff. Beautiful. And they're right. But that also includes, so I have a few colleagues who have faced bullying at their respective institutions, and they're freaked out about going back to campus. Oh my God, I've got to see the bully. I've been able to work at home remotely and get some peace. So where we need to go, we need to start coming up with collaborative solutions, collaborative meeting for college students, for entry-level people, for junior faculty, for HR, just as we took on sexual harassment. Now, and remember, sexual harassment was federally mandated and prohibited, meaning you had to address it. We need to get there, and we also need to get institutions to see this as a very serious health harming series of events.
You just teed me up for a beautiful segue into what the federal level and the state level can do. And I wonder when you address that in terms of what role we can reimagine for those two entities to play. Sorry
right now,
I wonder if you could also add to that the ways that you have defined bullying. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Not a problem. I use the Scandinavian definition. The Swedish have been really good. I think Swedish or Norway. They've been very good at studying stress in the workplace. And in the late 80s, early 90s, they really started looking into workplace bullying. So the definition that is at the bedrock of my work is workplace bullying is socially isolating, harassing, putting the target in an inferior position. It goes on over a period of 6 months or more, and it leaves the person really facing hard times on their job. It affects their job. When I say that to American audiences, they typically say, I don't need 6 months to realize that I'm being bullied. But I also recognize that the 6-month window is really saying it's not a one-off thing, like somebody pushed the button on the elevator and you disappeared. It's something that goes on and escalating over a period of time. Where do we need to go with that? Well, currently we have 5 states plus Puerto Rico that have anti-workplace bullying legislation. However, they're really limited. Either it only applies to state employees, or it just gives a recommendation that you should train to prohibit workplace bullying along with your training to avoid sexual harassment. Workplace bullying complaints are not actionable by themselves. You have to be able to weave it in to some other issue, whether it's an OSHA complaint or whether it's a Department of Labor complaint. But you can't just charge workplace bullying by yourself. So where do we need to go? I think colleges and universities need to seriously come to grips with how expensive workplace bullying is. Sure, it's legal, but it's not good for your institution. The average person who is bullied is spending 3.9 hours a week. That comes out to about 5 weeks a year. So if you take somebody's salary and you subtract 5 weeks of that salary, that's how much you're losing per person who is bullied. And that doesn't count all the bystanders who are watching the bully and decide to disengage and withdraw from the workplace because it's not safe. When schools and colleges and universities and organizations in general really come to terms with how they are wasting their human resources, perhaps they will be more proactive as a sector to end workplace bullying.
Yeah, so again, that money, where the money resides, we would like to think that if we have all this research that says that people aren't happy, people are stressed, people's health is compromised, that would be the impetus for change. But I appreciate and love the fact that you gave the receipts. You broke down those numbers like, no, and so this is also how much money you are losing by allowing this to sustain. And I also feel like I heard you concretely say, in the same ways that we've addressed sexual harassment, we need some litigation that not only defines it at a federal level for us, but then really builds in some accountability for organizations when
Yes. I was talking to a colleague of mine about 3 months ago, and he was so relieved. He had just retired and had commented, I haven't been sick since I left that bully that I was working for. And then I said, well, why did it go on for so long? And he said, nobody was ever held accountable. We all know who the bully is. If you work with a bully, you know who it is. You know what they do. You know who they go after. It is an open secret, but nobody, if the organization doesn't hold them responsible, the behavior keeps going.
If you always tee me up so perfectly. Magic, you're magic, ma'am. So should I deduce from that sometimes maybe it's better for people to work together to help each other? Should people, if I know the bully and you know the bully and they know the bully, should we all come together and say, hey, there's a bully and it's an open secret? Talk us through like practices of colleagues who maybe even see their colleagues being bullied, or they're aware of the bully. How should that play out?
So you have two questions there. One is about bystanders and one is about what we can do collectively. Let me tackle the first one. I want to study coming up how collective power and knowledge of power, power of knowledge, can help people resist workplace bullying. So kind of goes back to that old school thing, you know, blue collar and the union and all sorts of stuff. And I'm in Pennsylvania, so I'm in a union state, but that's why unions came about, is so several people with minimal power could protect their rights. So if you have a faculty union or AAUP, or you have a faculty senate, or you have those kinds of organizations on campus, collectively, they can push for policies to prohibit workplace bullying. I also said knowledge is power. So bullies, and I just wrote an article on this, it's in review. Bullies are more likely to engage in corrupt behavior. So if they're willing to break your heart, they're willing to break the OSHA rules, the accreditation rules, the NCAA rules, you name it, they are willing to break. Many are, not all, many are willing to break those rules. So if you know the rules and you can say, hey, you can't do that because Johnny's going to come up ineligible. So that backs off the bully to, unquote, blow the whistle, if you will. The reason why people don't come forward is because the institution, if it fails to protect them, or that target or that person reporting is more likely to face retaliation and reprisals behind it. They're more likely to be punished because they came forward. So unlike Title VII or some of the other employment rules, if you report something, you're protected from retaliation. With workplace bullying, there is not a federal statute that says you're protected from reporting those health harming behaviors. And you had there's a second question in there, the collective powers, and then
about the colleagues. But I just want to pause and say, I think that you told us that you gave us some gems about what you're about to drop. So it's like new stuff coming after the new stuff. You got stuff on stuff on stuff and stuff in review. So we are excited to continue to dig in and follow your journey as you unpack what will become like this collective mass. But that second question was around good practices for colleagues. What should is it like, if you see something, say something? What should I do as a colleague if I witness or suspect bullying?
The politically correct answer is go in and save the day. That's what I'm supposed to say. The real answer is pay attention to your own emotional safety. If you know stepping forward is going to put you in a health harming way, maybe there is another way to support that colleague. Maybe you can support that colleague, says, oh, I see X, Y, and Z happen. Let's look at the rules. You know, I see X, Y, and Z happened. So let me walk with you to HR. Let's look at the policies. Let's go to the faculty senate. But to stand in the gap in a meeting between the bully and someone being targeted, that is a personal decision. The other practice, and I tell people this all the time, there is no shame in leaving a toxic organization. We spend more waking time with the people at work than we often spend with our families. And so if that environment is not healthy or safe, think about what you need to do to create safe spaces at that school, create safe spaces maybe in social media or somewhere else where you're getting the appreciation and the support you deserve. Let your family know what is going on so you don't bring that toxicity home, but instead you engage everybody in solving your problems. But I don't want to say if you witness bullying, this is what you should do, because everybody has a different temperament. Everybody has a different set of energy to even fight that. But acknowledge what it is. And if somebody asks you, or you can go to the person being targeted, you can support in quiet ways instead of jumping up in a meeting and defending the person if it puts you in the crosshairs.
Yeah, because I feel like and thank you so much for that. I feel like another thing you said though is that bullies bullies might break rules. We have no reason to believe that a bully wouldn't break a rule, you know? So I think one of my huge takeaways from that is that you have to protect yourself, and you have to protect your joy, and you have to protect your health. And in any ways that you could see to do that, given your circumstances, which may mean leave the place, one must always take care of themselves. So I know I definitely want to open us up to questions from the audience, but I have one more question.
Sure thing.
Aside from the fact that you have put in your research tool, which we greatly appreciate, why should the good people read this book? Tell us why we need to engage in this particular work.
It's a different perspective. Through so much of my own research, HR is the GOAT. HR is thrown under the bus. It's HR's fault. I went to HR, they made it worse. HR has been the devil. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, HR has a boss too. And one of the comments from the book, from one of the open-ended statements, is an HR professional writes in, I'm the person people come to when they're being bullied. But how do I help myself? My boss is a bully. My boss doesn't listen. And I'm at the verge now where I'm having stress and anxiety. So I'm supposed to help people. I don't have the power to help them, nor can I help myself. And understanding that HR is just a function like every other unit can help people to better appreciate the position that HR professionals are in, and perhaps what they can do to join HR. Remember, I talked about collective power, to join HR or to advocate for policies so HR can be more protective of individuals. That's where my concern is at. But also HR is there to protect the institution. So if you squash bullying, you are protecting the institution from lost human resources in that time and disengagement that I mentioned earlier.
Dr. Hollis, listen, it is always a joy anytime that I can share space with you. And I have the privilege of seeing you a few times and having conversations with you, but I do want to open us up to other folks who perhaps have questions on the line. But I want to first say thank you so much for your work. Thank you so much for your brilliance. Thank you so much for your excellence. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. So Michelle, I don't know if we have any questions. I would love to give other folks an opportunity to interface with some of this brilliance.
Thank you. And your check is in the mail. You're wonderful. Thank you. I'm open to questions. Yes.
Yes, I do have some questions. Let's see. Please talk more about senior academic administrators and their roles in addressing bullying.
In just about every study that I've done, and I've been collecting data on this since 2012, several people invariably say, I need the cabinet to step in. I spoke with a former provost, a colleague of mine, and he said, sometimes we would get these stories and we just laugh about it. Your leadership, the people with the most power in the C-suite, if they don't intervene, nothing's going to change. And I have an article out, it came out a couple of years ago, Lessons from the Bobo doll experiments, which uses social psychology to explain how an organization either learns to self-police bad behavior or learns that the leader thinks it's okay and they're going to go ahead and engage in whatever behavior you want. So much like in a family structure where you have the kids and they're looking up to the parents have the power in that structure. In our organizations, those in the C-suite have the power, and we look to them for appropriate behavior. So it's very important how the leaders handle workplace bullying when it is reported.
Okay, thank you. Can you speak to the difference between bullying and insubordination? Sometimes a job is not a good fit. what is the point where it turns in what is the point where it turns into a bullying situation?
Sure. Insubordination is when you just don't do it. Somebody comes to you, your boss comes to you and says, you know, you needed to turn your grades in on time and you didn't do it. And that's insubordination. You're not following the functions of your job. Bullying, same person who doesn't turn in their grades, but the boss comes to them, calls them out of their name, yells at them, sends a group email to the entire department, putting them out there saying, you know, Dr. So-and-so didn't put in their grades. They did it again. The bullying is not about what the subordinate did or didn't do. It is about how the boss corrects them. It is about how you respect somebody. We all make mistakes. We're human beings. But if you come at me because I made a mistake and your goal is to shame me, diminish me, hurt me, disrespect me, you're bullying me. But if you come to me with the same correction, but you respect that I'm a human being, and you respect that I don't think anybody goes to work to purposely do a bad job. Respect my professionalism and say, you know, I have to talk to you about a mistake that happened, and this is what occurred when you don't follow through. If it's a serious enough issue, maybe it gets documented, but you still have to respect somebody in the process of correcting workplace behavior.
Very good, thank you. Can you please elaborate on what you said earlier about bullying not being illegal, but blossoming into a legal complaint? Specifically, I am referring to the employee who may report to HR or the CDO, but university policy, employment law, etc., don't apply. This leaves the employee with EEOC as the only possible remedy.
I would not say EEOC is the only possible remedy because it depends on what the issue is. So for example, you're working at a college or university and you find out that the CFO is skimming money from the vendors. That's not a diversity issue. That's a whistleblower issue. And so there are other ways to get at those bullying issues. But the way that I mean workplace bullying can move into a complaint.
Okay.
Let's imagine that you have, let's imagine you have two white women. And the reason why I'm choosing two white women is because the race is the same, the gender is the same. I could say two Black women, I could say two Latino women, it doesn't matter. So I've now erased protected class statuses between those two. But then one woman, and this is a true story, one woman takes maternity leave. The other woman, her boss, is jealous because she is unable to have children. So when the new mom comes back, her boss continues to harass her and bully her, doesn't let her go to the Christmas party, makes her work late after hours to make up for maternity leave, has made comments about that kind of thing. It feels like bullying. It is between two people of a protected class, but the underlying reason why she is bullied is pregnancy discrimination. Mm-hmm. So a bullying situation where you have two people of the same protected class and the one with more power is going after another of the same class, white women in this case, if the motivation for being bullied is discriminatory, abusive, or illegal, and now that new mom can prove I'm being treated differently because of pregnancy discrimination, that bullying scenario has just morphed itself into a pregnancy discrimination charge. It is the intent behind the bullying, and if the target can prove it.
Okay. Is there any data related to bullying of Black males in the academy? If so, what are their experiences?
I wrote an article about 3 years ago about Black men being bullied in the academy. Nope, and I did another one earlier, like 5 years ago. So I have two data sets on that. Black men are more bullied than white men. The Black men reported a gender-based form of bullying, such as people ask me, do I belong here? People ask for their ID going across campus. Those are racialized things that happen with Black men. The one study I did was examining white men and Black men and Black men's response to sleep issues because of stress. Interestingly enough, in that study, even though Black men were bullied more than white men lost more sleep behind it than Black men. And when I presented that at a conference, a couple of the Black men in the audience said, I'm not worried about being bullied by my administrative assistant. I'm worried about driving across town and not being shot. And that really hit me like, whoa. So the comments that I was receiving from Black men are, yes, Black men are being bullied, and they're very aware of the gendered racist discrimination that's heaped on them, even if it's not said. But their bigger worries are about, my 14-year-old is on a camping trip, is he going to be okay? Or my child has to walk home from X, Y, and Z. A boy has to be okay. Black men are also less likely to be, Black men are also more likely to be the subject of gossip and passive aggressive forms of bullying. Like, they won't get bullied in their face. They get comments and rotten things said about them. And Black men are more likely to say, you know what, I'm going somewhere else. Black men are more likely to leave.
Okay. Have you found any unique data related to same gender and or same race bullying?
Yes. David Yamada originally started talking about workplace bullying as status free. So similar to the scenario I gave earlier about a white woman bullying a white woman. So absolutely, anybody can be a bully. And so if you're working at, say, a Hispanic serving institution, and you might be a Latino male, if your boss is a Latino male and bullies you, sure, race and gender are the same, and there's a bullying situation going on. That is why bullying behaviors need to be prohibited, because the target in that scenario will have a tough time claiming, I'm being bullied because I'm a Hispanic male, because there's another Hispanic male bullying him. He would need to find some other issues going on in his environment. Let's suppose there's 3 Latin men in that department and all of them are being bullied, but the women are okay. And there could be some reason why the boss chose to bully all of the Latin men like himself. The same thing we see often, and the term is called queen bee bullying. When a woman ascends the ladder of her career and she purposely shuts the door behind her and tries to prove to the other men that she's just as powerful and worthy, and she chooses other women to prove it. And so in some studies, women are reporting more bullying from other women than from men.
Okay. What are some individual strategies to deal with bullying for faculty and staff?
Ooh, those are 2 very different populations. And with faculty, it depends on your position, meaning, are you adjunct, lecturer, assistant, associate, et cetera? Do you have tenure or not? Is there any more clarity on faculty and staff? Is there any more clarity from that question?
No, it's saying, what are some individual strategies to deal with bullying? And in parentheses, it says for faculty and staff.
So I'll answer the garden variety. Take copious notes. Document everything, even your own personal diary, the time, the place, what happened, who witnessed it, what was the impact on you or your students or what have you. Very similar to those who have faced sexual harassment or racial discrimination, and you're asked to name specific dates and times and instances, the same thing should go on with workplace bullying. That is certainly one strategy. Find out if there are other people in that environment who are going through the same thing, because workplace bullying tends to isolate people. So everybody's not running around saying, hey, I was bullied today. But once in a while, somebody will email somebody else and say, hey, I'd like to run something past you. So find other people who are experiencing the same thing and join that collective power. With staff, I did a study very early on and found that employees, this is staff, not faculty, who are 35 and younger will stay 2 to 3 years and leave. Still mobile, don't have kids yet, probably have a car loan, probably haven't bought a house yet. They're more mobile and have not hit that sandwich generation just yet, where you're taking care of babies and elder parents. Once people hit 40, bought a house, father-in-law's moved in, you've got kids, they're less mobile. And so the strategies they use to deal with bullying will look different and may take into consideration their home situation. So can you move? Maybe you live in a metropolitan center and you can find a job at another college or university. Some people leave academia altogether. So the strategies really need to be applied to whatever context that person is, your job, if you have tenure, can you move, financial situations, things like that. One thing I will say, do not isolate yourself. There is an influx of shame when somebody is bullied. Like, what did I do? Why is this happening to me? And it's proven in the data that those who are bullied tend to be quiet. Instead, expand your network, knock on those doors, look up people, go to lunch, find ways to reconnect and keep your network warm. Because as people find out what's going on with you, you'd be amazed at how many people want to help you and are empathetic that you're facing that. So don't lock yourself up, lock yourself off from your escape hatches, if you will. Chat it up privately, be circumspect about it, but let people know what's going on so you can get assistance, whether it's finding a counselor, which I highly recommend, whether it's finding a doctor, whether it's finding another job, whether it's finding a place to go on vacation so you can chill out, but let people know what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can you talk about how state policies may not be beneficial or help those experiencing workplace bullying?
I examine the state policies of California, Utah, Minnesota, Maryland, Tennessee. Those are the states that have some kind of policy, and most recently Puerto Rico. So these are the early adopters. They are documenting that, yeah, we need to address bullying. But if you look closely at those policies, they do not permit for action just on bullying. It is a series of recommendations. In fact, I hate to say this, I think the anti-smoking laws are stronger than the anti-bullying laws. So the state policies, people are just getting started with passing those. The bigger issue is if the organization passes laws or policies. So for example, Alamo Colleges in San Antonio, Texas, they have an excellent policy. University of South Carolina, their faculty senate is very aggressive with stamping out workplace bullying. These are collective efforts coming from the grassroots of your staff and your faculty. I believe University of Wisconsin also has a wonderful policy and training. You'd have to check out their website. So at this current stage, don't rely on the state policies. Instead, consider how your organization can come together and decide for itself that workplace bullying won't be tolerated.
Okay. Do you think that the university is immune from bullying and lawsuits?
Absolutely not. I think higher education is more prone to it. I love higher education. I tell people this all the time. I grew up outside of Pitt, Johnstown. It was 5 minutes from my house. I have never, ever left higher education. And so when I found that this was a problem, that 2/3 of us are facing workplace bullying, I was very sad. And sometimes I open up my data and I'm like, wow, all this pain that is in here. Because of, and mind you, I'm a tenured faculty member, so I'm not poo-pooing on tenured folks, but there's something about the competition to go for tenure, the permanence of tenure, that sometimes enables people to act out pretty bad. I mean, if you think about it, who else has a job for life? What, the Supreme Court? So because higher education is so hung up on status and competition, and I'm better than you are, that's why we have all these ranks and stratas and all this other stuff. I think higher education is more prone to it. And from time to time in the data collection from HR, I had a couple of people who had come from corporate, were working at a university, and were saying, I don't understand how people are getting away with this. I'm going back to corporate where it's safe. It's just our structure. And with those kinds of freedoms comes great responsibility. But I think colleges and universities at any level, your career schools all the way to the most lofty schools, we have a responsibility to treat each other well, to treat each other with respect. Just because I disagree with you doesn't mean you get to punish me. And I think, unfortunately, higher education is more susceptible to that behavior.
Okay, thank you. I noticed that you said it is important to leave a toxic organization. How do you leave a toxic organization without hindering your career?
That's very tough. This happens more often to women than men, where your career is interrupted. In fact, a comment from one of my very first studies, like, it's a shame to have an awesome career interrupted by a bully. And this particular person had commented they got their dream job, they've been wanting this job forever, and then the boss was a bully. And that's where I'm saying one has to decide what choices you want to make. Is the bully close to retirement and you can wait them out? Are you willing to relocate? You've always wanted to live on the West Coast. You always wanted to live in the Chicagoland area. Maybe this is the time to do it. Maybe because of your family situation, you can't leave. Maybe your child just got a special tutor, or your in-laws are ill and you just can't leave. Every situation is different, which is why I advise a clinical psychologist to help you make decisions that are based on your rationale on your goals, not based on emotional stuff where you just say, hey, I quit, unless you're independently wealthy and you can do that. And the other thing I will say about psychologists is shop around. Everybody's not the same, and all psychologists are not the same. So feel free to shop around and go to a couple different appointments, see who works for you. This is your support system to help you get through the challenges of workplace bullying.
Thank you. Does bullying only happen when the person with power supervises the other person?
No, because there are different kinds of power. So one kind of power that I write about is expert power. The person who maybe just got the huge Guggenheim grant and everybody is so excited about their new research, but wow, they're such an ogre to work with. We did a conference several months ago, actually in March, about STEM the bullying, and we are finding out that a number of graduate students and postdocs are subjected to very aggressive behaviors in the lab. Another example I use is personal power. So let's imagine your administrative assistant has been working on campus for 15 years, and her kid plays soccer with the vice president's kid. And every Saturday, your administrative assistant is sitting up there with the vice president talking it up. Well, she's got some different kind of power there. She's personally poised. If she's been there for 15 years, she knows the procurement rules. She knows when the deadlines are. She has the power over your schedule and your budget and can use that as a weapon, unfortunately. So it doesn't just have to be a boss. It can be a peer. It could be a group that's mobbing. It could be someone who has some kind of influence over you or your environment in some way. It's just the most typical power differential is in the organization.
Okay. Okay, this is a long one. Are there resources for people on campus? Because the bullies on my campus are resourceful and are litigation happy. Have you seen cases where AAUP is taken over by white men who are only interested in protecting their free speech academic freedom so that they can continue to bully? So the protections in place don't work quite the way they are intended.
That particular dynamic, I have heard at different institutions with different races and genders. So for example, we just did an interview for the Proctor Institute with a gentleman from a tribal college. And he had talked about how one particular group had dominated the governance structure, and the tribal college needed to make some changes to break up that power structure. So to answer that question, and it's not just AAUP, yes, I have seen where one particular group comes together and dominates a governance structure so they can have their way. I've seen that. And the way you break that up is find another group of people who want it to be fair. And you're going to have to chip away at it. Elections come up. Maybe there's an AAUP and a faculty union. Maybe they're separate. Maybe there is another way for a group of people to approach the provost or an ombuds or somebody like that to address these issues. It is not easy. It will not happen overnight. But with the interview for the tribal college that we did a couple weeks ago, he did finally get a foothold into that governance structure and made some changes. You have to be persistent, and you should bring more people with you to try to break up that power circle.
Okay, thank you. What about relational aggression that is so hard to pinpoint? Bullies are very good at making it look like they're not doing anything.
That's a common tactic for the bully to become the victim. One comment I received in a study was from a provost. By the time it gets to my office, there's so much blood on the floor, I don't know who started it. Once again, this is where taking notes, documenting everything, talking with other people who have been the target of that same behavior, back to that notebook and taking copious notes and timelines for what happened.
Okay. How can the bullies make sure they don't turn into, how can the bullied make sure they don't turn into a bully, similar to how abused children grow up to be abusers?
Again, there's two things. First of all, of course, as you can see, I'm a big proponent of a psychologist. And sometimes people do that. They become what hurt them so it won't happen to them. But also, it's the same conversations I have about implicit bias. Have conversations. We all work in areas where, hey, maybe you had a bad day. Maybe the accreditation is coming. Maybe, the NCA peer reviewers are coming. Something is going on and you're stressed out. One of the things I used to do is I certainly went to lunch when I was an administrator. I went to lunch with the administrative assistant or would meet up for coffee. And I have no problem asking, did this work out for you? Is there something I can do to be better for you? I recognize in those situations where I was an assistant dean or head of a unit that I had the power. But like I said, when you have power, you have a responsibility. And I don't think there's anything wrong with asking, how did that work out? Is there anything we could do to improve the next time we have to write a self-study? Is there something that didn't work out for you, you needed more notice with? Being authentic and transparent with the people around you elicits trust, and it helps you to get feedback on how people are receiving you. And be open to the criticism. Because if you ask somebody to say, hey, does my breath stink? And they say yes, and then you get mad and don't take the breath mint, they'll never tell you again that your breath stinks. It's the same thing with bullying. If you ask people how you're treating them and want a true answer, be prepared to accept the feedback and thank them for taking the risk of telling you and make the adjustment. That's how you can prevent morphing into a bully personality.
Okay. What are some good questions to ask when interviewing for jobs that would help identify environments of bullying?
What's your turnover like? People vote with their feet, especially your entry level and middle level people. I've seen people make that mistake. The job looks so great, looks really juicy, but wait a minute, 50% of the staff has left in the last 18 months. Be very careful of things like that. Look to see if you can find, I mean, the internet is amazing. Check out the internet. You can see complaints or issues or problems that are going on at an institution. Use your soft network. So we all do that. Hey, I see a job that's opened at such and such. What do you know? And I've had some people say, don't touch it. No, I know it looks great. The other thing, if you're internal, there's always that really cool job that's always open. And so perhaps a head of a department comes in and say, I'll call it an associate dean. They're there for 18 months and they leave, but nobody internally applies for it. So you get another associate dean. They're there for 2 years and then leave, but nobody internal will pay attention. So that's a signal to the institution. And we've got to look at this hotspot, but that's also a signal to applicants that there's a problem in that area. I think the biggest question to ask is, what's your turnover like? What is the morale of the staff? Try to find out that kind of stuff. And also, shoot, I used to do this when I was recruited for sports. Find a way to get away from the interview schedule for time to yourself and just wander around and ask people. You don't have to hear the words. You can see the body language. Those are different strategies. Yeah.
Okay. And what would a policy look like that addresses bullying?
I have one on my website, actually, diversitytrainingconsultants.com. I do have Alamo College's policy on there, but more importantly, the policy should look like what the people want it to look like. Alamo College's policy brought in students. Some policies that I've seen have been by and for and about faculty. The way faculty bully each other is different than the way staff bully each other. You may want to have an anti-retaliation policy in there, which is a good idea. You may have in your policy something about regular training. You may have something in there about what accountability looks like. It is up to the organization to take advantage of a time to create some scaffolding for themselves about what is acceptable behavior. And the development of those policies, my recommendation, should be across the board. It should not be a top-down policy, because there are things going on in development than what's going on with grounds and maintenance, and different still than what's going on in the anthropology department. Bring all of those people together, even if they're working on separate policies for different sectors of the university. But the policy can be what you want it to be, but certainly sit it next to your anti-discrimination and harassment policies. And there should be an anti-retaliation piece, because people will not come forward if they think they will not be protected from retaliation.
Okay. Are employee assistant program vendors reporting trends such as workplace bullying? I know it's confidential for employees, but wondered if they report trends.
I'm sorry, can you restate that question?
Sure. Are employee assistance programs,
EAPs, okay.
vendors reporting trends such as workplace bullying? I know it's confidential for employees, but wondered if they report trends.
The only thing that I have seen, I think that's an excellent question, is that people who are bullied are more likely to seek out EAP. And for those who don't know, that's the counseling arm that may be, not must, may be associated with your benefits. and you can go as part of your benefits package with your institution. I saw a stat 10 years ago that there's an 18% jump for folks who seek out EAP if they've been bullied. I can't say that's reliable either, because as with any university, let's suppose you're an associate director and you seek out the advising or counseling at your institution. The institution has a right to pull your private records. So if you want to go talk about harassment, discrimination, your health, whatever, if you are reporting it to somebody who is directly linked to your university, it's not as confidential as you think. If you really want to keep your conversations confidential, go to a private psychologist who may be paid for by your insurance, but is not part of the EAP program and not part of your university counseling. All that to say, yeah, people seek out EAP, but I understand people more so seek out private counselors.
Okay. Let's see. I have, how can staff protect themselves from bullying efforts perpetrated jointly by faculty and students when there isn't a bullying policy for either?
If I'm understanding this correctly, it sounds like faculty and a couple of students are mobbing a single target. That's what this sounds like. Once again, collect the data, keep the notes. And it's really unfortunate, and I think amoral, to pull students into this. Students have their own stuff to worry about. They have their own exams, they have their own papers, they have their own lives. So to pull students in, I think is really a horrible situation. And I have seen that. That is a tougher one to do. The situation that I know of is a colleague said something against a favorite politician of the school. The board of trustees didn't like it, and they recruited a couple students to go after him. And all of a sudden, he was gone. And it happened so fast. Document what's going on, keep records, report it to somebody internally. Even if you're going to an ombuds or EEO or something, bring it to somebody's attention. You may not be making the complaint formally, but you're putting somebody else on notice that you think this is what's going on. That's a tough one to break up when faculty and students join ranks to oust somebody. That one is tough.
Okay, a couple of more questions we have time for. What about union representative staff faculty titles? Is there room to incorporate anti-bullying, anti-retaliation legislation through union organizing?
Absolutely. And it depends on the state. I mean, there's some unions that they take it head on. There are some unions, here's the flip side. Some faculty say, I don't want you policing me. I have academic freedom. I can say and do what I want. Interestingly enough, in AAUP from their 1940 statement on tenure and promotion, those of us who enter faculty ranks have a responsibility to be dignified and respectful, even if we disagree. But yes, a union, an organization, you all could decide to be women of the Western Shore, for example, and you have enough people, committed people, to move forward and to go to executives and say, we need a policy. A union is nice. AAUP is nice. I recommend those as well, but also know you don't have to have those formal structures. You can create your own collection of dedicated people to try to stop these kinds of behaviors. I'm back to that collective power piece again.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Two more questions.
Sure.
How can staff work towards creating an ombudsman position for their school?
I write in the book, actually, this is a perfect time to reintroduce the ombuds position. Ombuds positions first came to the United States from Sweden. That's where they started. Imagine that, right? In 1967, at the height of the civil rights movement and protesting Vietnam. And so on a campus that has so much strife, for example, my dad was on campus when those 4 students were shot at Kent State. It was a very contentious time. But if you have an ombudsperson who people could come visit, and people who go visit ombudsmans are called visitors, and can talk about how they feel about race, how they feel about gender, how they feel about policies being broken, the ombudsman, if the leadership empowers them, can be very creative in resolving those issues. If you all want to develop an ombuds office, one argument certainly is, in the last couple years, our American fabric has been so torn up with racialized and gendered bias. And one of the things that an ombuds came onto campuses for in the first place is to try to give voice to everybody. They have some place to go and have their concerns heard. So that's one argument for an ombuds, period. Second of all, do you have a number of unresolved complaints? For example, let's use sexual harassment. I've had women come and say, I'm being sexually harassed, but I don't want to get the harasser in trouble. I don't want to ruin his career. Or it's a postdoc who needs that person for a reference. If you go formally to EEO, EEO is mandated by federal law to investigate and act on it. If you go to an ombudsperson, it is not viewed as putting the institution on notice, but it does give the ombudsperson an informal way of resolving the matter. The person who's the subject of the report does not have their career besmirched. The person making the complaint has some safety. They get to keep their identity private if they like. So those are all the reasons to go to your administration and say, we want to create an ombuds position. And most ombuds positions in higher education, at least the early ones, emerged from other faculty, senior faculty, who know the landscape for the faculty, who know what the rules and the policies are, well respected by upper administration. So there is a chapter in the book about ombuds, and I would certainly collect that data about what you're losing financially, who it's hurting, and how the ombudsman or ombudsperson can make a difference.
Okay, thank you. Last question we have time for. What are the biggest mistakes colleges and universities make when someone reports bullying?
Brush it off. If somebody has the nerve and the courage to come forward and report it, with everything we've learned in this workshop today, HR is kind of pinned down. They don't always have the power to do it, that it's health harming, that you're facing retaliation, and that there are no laws to protect you unless the organization's policing themselves. The person reporting it is in a great deal of pain. If it's not resolved one way, it will be resolved another, meaning the institution either A, can pay attention to the complaint, even pay attention if there are a number of complaints coming from the same division or department. If you don't act on it as an institution, that person either leaves, they disengage, which means you're paying them for half of their possible output. The person finds a way to turn it into an external complaint, but shrugging it off doesn't make it go away. In other words, being that ostrich and putting your head in the sand, it just makes the rest of you a bigger target. You have to pay attention to it because people are taking a big risk to come forward in the first place. And many will find some way to find relief. And most of those strategies hurt the institution, even if it's turnover, which is grossly expensive.
Okay. Thank you very much, Leah. We're going to go into the raffle aspect of our event. And we know that you have 2 books that we're raffling off. So we're going to.
If I may, and I just say this, if I may interrupt real quick.
Sure.
So often when I've done these, and even when I go to campuses, I fully understand there might be people in the audience who are here and they don't want their bully on their campus to know. So I'm very happy to do the raffle, but I would prefer to maintain the privacy of our 2 winners.
Okay, sure will. We will do a random generator using a random generator. We'll pick 2 winners and we will follow up with them via email.
Can you let us know when the winners will be notified though?
Oh, we'll notify them by the end of the day.
Oh, wonderful. So
Yes.
2 people will be notified by the end of the day.
Yes, they will be.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Very welcome.
Awesome. All right, so that is the end of our event. On behalf of the Proctor Institute, I wanted to thank you, Leah Hollis, as well as Tanisha Williams for an insightful discussion. I would also like to thank the attendees for joining us today for this important conversation. I wanted to also thank the members of our team who worked to prepare for today's event, Michelle and Priscilla, for managing the tech, going through the questions, as well as live tweeting today's event. As Michelle mentioned, we will send a follow-up email to those selected for the raffle, and then we'll also send the book code in a follow-up email along with handouts of the slides. Finally, we are going to record this event and have it prepared and ready to send to everyone in the next week. So please be on the lookout for that. If you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to any of us on our team. We're happy to answer any questions. And then thank you all again and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.